So chances are, if you clicked on this video, you're probably in the mindset that there has to be more than 9 to 5, or you're already actively looking at that, and maybe you've got a specific skill set in design or web development or any other big agency skill sets, and you're looking to make that transition. Well, if that's you, this video is for you. I'm Jean-Claude Graven. I run my own digital agency. I've been across the board working with different clients, from beginning startups to major companies in the fintech space, in the medical space, both locally and internationally, for the last heading to 3 decades. So I've got a little bit of knowledge in this space. I think you're going to find it useful. So sit back, relax, and let me show you how to become a Technomancer. So you're going to hear me throw that statement out a lot on this channel, the idea of a Technomancer. And to me, a Technomancer is kind of like a one-person digital agency. It's somebody that specializes maybe in one skill or maybe in a set of different skills, but is somebody that can pretty much come to play in managing either themselves with multiple skill sets or a team of people with multiple skill sets. And the real idea behind that is that's just with the age that we're moving into, the age of the Technomancer, the age where we create magic, quote unquote, from technology. And that's where we are today, right? You can build a company pretty much with AI, assuming you've got the foundational skill sets. The idea, if it's a one-click start thing, is a nice fantasy for lazy people, but it's the modern day get-rich-quick scheme. We all know, and anyone that's close to the technology knows it's far more complicated. But enough of that. Let's get into the core topic today, which is making that transition from your 9 to 5 into the agency world or into the freelance world, because you might be coming from those two different approaches. Number one, you've got a skill set and you're moving into freelance, but you're trying to really figure out how to manage this. You're kind of finding yourself stuck. I'm going to talk a lot about the psychology here. These were mindsets that I had to shift and transition in. Or you may be already in that process and you want to scale working with more people because you want to build into the agency style, but you keep kind of falling below the range. You're not breaking past a certain income barrier. You're not breaking past a certain kind of clientele or market, and that's really what we're going to be diving into. And I think for us to really go there, we have to start with the single most important thing of it all, the psychology, your mindset. And it may seem stupid for a lot of people looking at this thing, go like, I'm looking for the strategy, I'm looking for the technique. But the fact of the matter is there is a lot of programs and courses and YouTube videos out there teaching you various strategies, yet people still aren't successful in them. And sure, a lot of those are those typical get-rich-quick schemes that don't really come to front. But the biggest problem is that people aren't taking action on them. And the reason people aren't taking action is not necessarily because they're lazy. It's very easy for us to kind of put that label on, or just think that people are dumb, or even think that about ourselves, that we're just really not that motivated or really not cut out for it. And it's not at all the case. The fact is that your belief systems will determine your actual potential to take action. So if you're not able to take action, if you find yourself sabotaging in the spaces where you know you should be doing more, chances are very, very likely that there's either a serious traumatic event there, something that's preventing you, and that is most likely tied to B, which is a belief system that has resulted from this. The kind of belief system that says your value is equated to the time spent. The other kind of ideas may be things like you can't really make it, or it's other people, it's a skill set that you don't have. The fact of the matter is we live in a world where 17-year-olds are making millions on the internet, and the age gap seems to get younger. And the other thing you'd notice is that most of those people probably have less skills than you do. In fact, this is a great transition for a lot of people when they actually start looking at some of the people that are making great bang for buck, that don't have their skill sets, don't have their years of experience, don't have their ability or their passion, and they're still doing it. And it's really at this point in time where, given the internet access, that you could reach clients across the world, you're no longer restricted to your geography. It shows us that it's, and it's clearly obviously not a skills gap, it shows us that it's more of a belief and a reach gap. And the reach is because of the belief. You see, if you've got low belief in yourself and your value, you're not going to do what I'm doing right now, right? You're not going to put yourself on the internet, talk about your product, talk about your value, share your ideas, expose your personality. or your tattoos. Trust me, I hardly ever even show these things to most of my clients. And it's not because I'm shy, Fred, but it's because I respect my clients. Some of them don't share my views, share my beliefs, and I don't have to impose that. That may not be you, right? We all may have very different perspectives. Here in the show, I'm going to be very honest and vulnerable with you. I'm going to tell you the truth of my journey. I'm going to take you through a lot of experiences. So yeah, you're going to see some of my ink. But the fact of the matter is, the belief that you have in yourself and your capacity determines how much of yourself you're willing to bring in the front. And the truth is, if you're reaching a larger group of people compared to the next person, or the same group of people compared to another person with the same type of skills, the difference of them picking them over you is just simply going to boil down to personality. Now, if you're able to demonstrate your personality, your qualities, your values, your belief systems, your frames, people are going to be able to perceive that, and they're going to be linking their internal values to you. So the first idea there is the raising of your self-esteem, the raising of your, in other words, the fundamental belief that you can do it. An old classic book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, that was one of the first principles, right? And it's all classic in the positive thinking domain that simply says that the first step to success is a sense of certainty about your ability to achieve the success. So whatever your dream, desire, your want, whether it's to build an agency, to become a successful freelancer, to grow whatever brand or company or product you're doing, the prerequisite is a sense of certainty, which is simply a belief about your capacity to achieve that. So you could be looking at the world saying, oh, you know, these people have more experience, they have more money, they have more this, and all you're doing is you're psychologically discrediting what could potentially be a new neural network, a new framework on how to perceive reality, because that's it. Our beliefs filter how we experience reality. And in fact, a very interesting study was done with a group of women who went through an experiment where they said they're going to put scars and marks on their face and to see the criticism of an interviewer and the judgments. And before they went out to go for this segment, the people pretended that they were going to just touch up the makeup, but what they actually did is they removed these scars and they just kind of left them looking good. And when they came back from it, they had evidence, they had stories, they had examples of how they were discriminated against because of these marks on their face. Meantime, there was nothing even on their face. We do the same thing in many areas. You're predetermining your value when you're entering a conversation with people because of your self-esteem or your self-concept. You see, and this is one of the biggest problems we're making that shift from the 9 to 5. You see yourself only in that value. You're kind of a number in a company in most cases. So it's, you know, how many hours did you put in? You know, how did you make your coworkers feel? You know, did you take any 6 days? So your value starts to be determined through your qualification in certain instances, your years with company, and the amount of hours that you put in, how much work you got done in those hours. But this is a very different paradigm when it comes to business. You see, because the people that you work for in those situations, they're not selling how many hours they can perform. Because if you're going to compete on price and you're going to compete on time, you're always going to be beaten by someone else in another country with different circumstances. Right? So that's not really where it is. There's companies like Pentagram that charge $1 million for producing a logo, right? You can get a logo done for you on Fiverr for a few dollars versus that kind of money. But why? The why is the value sell. It's the value position. You see, one of the core differences here is that the typical employee is kind of in this scarcity mindset. Right? And not for everybody. You may love the career. I mean, I worked for many years with various companies, from Google to Bidvest to MB to a variety of others, and I held very senior positions, and I loved it. Right? I was getting an exceptionally great paycheck. I was living a decent kind of life. I didn't have stress or worries, and there was a lot of stability. I knew that money was coming at the end of the month. Very different ball game when you suddenly switch over to entrepreneurship. Yes, the scale of amount of money you can make is far greater. Right? But that initial thing, because now you're no longer relying on somebody else, right? You're no longer begging for value. You're no longer, getting to a certain space and getting comfortable inside of that value. When you switch over to entrepreneurship, you now have to extract value. You not only have to extract value, you need to identify pain, and you need to almost help people solve those pain points. So you're going to be flexible, but fundamentally this means you have a model of the universe that assumes there is infinite scale financially, there's infinite scale of value, and you have the capacity to discover, extract, and deliver that value. It is a realization that the problem is different for every single person. And your value is not in the amount of hours that you can present. Your value is fundamentally in how much value does this have for the client in terms of the pain or the problem that they are solving. Right? I mean, that's it. Like if you go into a company and they are contemplating or thinking about moving a website onto a different service provider simply because that service provider has a better reputation with clients that they're going afterwards. That's a certain kind of value spent, but let's just say that server of theirs has just gone down or that website has just gone down and you're the engineer that knows how to step in and debug that problem to get the site back online. Your value proposition of what you can ask for is far superior. You know, the other question, the other argument there is, what about it is just a certain skill set that you've got, right? The same thing occurs here in the sense of you're serving time, right? You're saving the other person time. You're giving them value. For example, they can go to any other person. Let's just say it's a WordPress site and you're a WordPress developer. They can surely go get their own WordPress site done by some guy off the internet that's a web designer that's going to get a pre-done template and put that up. And that's fantastic. That's great. That's probably going to cost them a small amount of money to do. Maybe it's $1,000, maybe it's $500. It depends on obviously the climate and the country that you are in. I'm in South Africa, so 10 to 20,000 rand for a site like that. And it's quick, it's easy, they're fast, and their argument is going to be, my friend can do this for me in 2 hours. Why should I pay you an extra zero at the end of that to do the exact same thing? And that's really where the educational point would be of that client, because they're not attached to the value when they're just starting out. They're just beginning in their business, and that's one of the big problems. You're probably looking at the wrong segment of the market. You're probably trying to solve problems because you're trying to prove value instead of going out and solving pain and creating value. So the difference is the one's trying to prove their value. No, our price is better. No, we can do less. Versus the other one creates value. And I'll give you an example of the creating value. The creating value individual doesn't even bother with the entry 20%, target market that's going to just get up because they just need a website. They just need to get up and running. And that's maybe completely fine for them. They want somebody that probably has more knowledge of the problem. You see, because the person with more knowledge of the problem has probably gone that route. They've set up the quick website and then 2 weeks later they got hacked. There was spam on the website. The spam kept fooling. There's so many rubbish emails they couldn't differentiate clients anymore. Their site was incredibly slow. And they started realizing the impact of this upon their business and their bottom line. Maybe there was, credit card information and that got exploited and it lost their entire company. Very, very different from the engineer or the more experienced developer that comes in and says, okay, that's great. You want a website? Do you even need a content management system? Do you even need this? Have you considered security? What are these processes around that? Now, when you're coming in from that perspective, those are two very, very different conversations. The one's trying to prove their value so they're going to keep cutting down on prices. It's not a life you want to live. The other one understands they're a domain specialist, but more specifically, they understand the pain the client's going to go through before the client's even gone through it. And this is where the marketing comes in. The marketing side is their ability to identify clients, or should we call them user avatars or personas that have gotten that problem or on their way to that problem, and they're able to go ahead and solve that problem for them, making the value and as such the price tag far higher in terms of the return. Because let's face it, I would 10 times rather pay that extra zero for a company that's going to set up my site and include a good reputation for me. I'm not going to get hacked. I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm going to get decent performance and delivery time for my clients when it suddenly scales because I'm doing a launch event, versus the other one that was cheap. I got it up quickly. Didn't really care about the fine details, whether it was consistent in human experience and the degree of trust that actually achieves within clients. And then suddenly that thing breaks the moment I have that big launch event that I've been holding up for. And now what? I go back to a person that doesn't have the skill sets, right? And he's not going to be able to deliver. And if you were that guy, you're going to struggle yourself. But the reason I think most people don't do this is because they tend to think that money is limited. They tend to think that clients are limited. The fact of the matter is it's not. So new studies show that the concept of money is pretty much infinite scale. And money is not a finite resource, it's an ever-flowing resource. Now, that's not saying it's not finite in certain regions, but anyone can have access to greater money by moving and accessing other areas. And if you're watching this, you have access to the internet, so you've got access to all those markets. The other idea here is that infinite scale is that if you look again, and it's back to the beliefs, if you think people don't have money, you're going to try and sell to people that don't have money. And you're going to verify or get a testimony to your belief. It's same as the idea when you suddenly buy a new car and suddenly you see that car everywhere, right? Well, that's because your reticular formation, the portion of your brain that's responsible for your survival, starts to identify these patterns inside of your world. And now that you accepted this was a range of possibility, it now sees it everywhere. So the same thing is if you accept that there are possibilities of the kind of clients that you want to work with. But that brings us to the next component. So instead of trying to move from this, trying to prove value to creating value and demonstrating value, there's a completely different kind of mindset. Because the one is you're so convinced and you're so entitled, you're so aligned to what the value you have as an individual that you're able to demonstrate that. You can demonstrate this in many cases, case studies, little apps and little solutions that you're building, podcasts and things that you're sharing your information on, versus the other one that's just trying to wait for somebody to see him. It's the old classic band mentality, right? We're gonna suddenly be seen, we're suddenly gonna be famous, versus the one that's actually just out there delivering value, creating value, pushing value. And that's what the market is, right? Are you creating value? And that's it, right? That's why, a channel like this, that's why all these other YouTube channels that you see, because all they're doing is they're pushing value. Because in a market where everyone's doing everything, you're probably going to link to the one that sells you the most, as I've mentioned. But now the other part there is the other person may be producing value, may be pushing all of this stuff up, but you're talking to the wrong people. You're talking to the people that don't have the money. You need to be reaching the clients that you're after. And the only way you're going to do that is by having a clearly defined user persona. In other words, you need to know who the people are that you're talking to. Are you trying to reach CTOs? Are you trying to reach marketing agents? Are you trying to reach qualified leads within a certain income bracket? Because this kind of knowledge will also help you determine where do you put your advertising, your bang for buck. You see, whereas an Instagram may give you a region or something like that for your focus, in LinkedIn you can get specific income brackets for companies, right? You can get far more granular information, and it depends on the platform and the focus. And then on top of that, is LinkedIn the right platform for you? Is YouTube the right platform for you? Is Facebook the right platform for you? Is TikTok? You shouldn't be going on these things or pushing your attention on these things because they seem to be popular. They may be very popular, but not necessarily with the audience that's relevant to your service or your product. And that's a big, big difference. The people get very confused with following these trends. They think, oh, these people are doing it, I should be doing it, we should be hopping on the trends. The fact of the matter is there's a lot of people that are influencers that get large followings but have very, very poor conversion. In a previous niche of mine, I had a YouTube channel where I did something like 10,000 people. It was a very, very niche kind of product. And there was a competitor of mine in that same niche. He had over 120,000 followers in his one. Still small, in comparison to some of those other channels, but extremely niche. The difference between my channel and his channel is in his entire 150, he had something like 3 to 10 people overall convert in his entire process. That's a very, very small ratio that we're looking at for conversion. We're below percent, whereas my conversion percentage was 30% up, right? And these were high ticket products. So the difference though is not necessarily the message. The difference is, are you talking to the right people? We're both in the same market, but I understood who exactly my clientele is, what kind of conversion I wanted, who do I want. So ask yourself, who are the kind of clients you want to work with? What is their personalities like? Because this also allows you to funnel for that. Now you have the ability to help somebody get onto your website or get onto your sales funnel, get onto your forms, and you get to qualify for that. Are you a micromanager? Right? Do you have X budget or Y budget? Right? Do you have to report with a team, with a broad team? Do you have a clearly defined objective? Right? These are all questions you can ask up front in your qualification phase, because unlike number one, where you're just trying to see if somebody sees your value, please hire me. Now you're starting to qualify for value, because you're not only you're recognizing the value that you're bringing, you're recognizing the problems that you're able to solve, and you're focusing on those. You're not spreading yourself too thin. And as a result, now you start qualifying the kinds of clients that you want to work with, that you can bring the ultimate value for and be in the best space. Because if you're in your best space, you're going to do your best work, and that's going to speak to more clients in the area that you're after. So we have this very clear idea difference that there's a scarcity mindset there, and there's a very much a risk tolerance difference between the entrepreneur and the employee. The employee does like the safety and the security, and that's again why we say that this is a lot easier when you're younger, but it also may be easier when you're older in terms of your capacity to put aside funds to prepare you during that initial phase of getting up into market. And the catch is that people will go into that market and then they'll find a client, and then this client becomes everything. They do absolutely everything to serve this client, and they don't want to lose this client, so they really try and push over work and they do extra hours. And as noble as that is, that does not prevent the client from leaving. Right? Now, it doesn't mean that the client's malicious. That company may be bought out by someone else. Right? Another sales agent, another digital agency may come in with better resources to offer them at a better rate, right? With more years of experience. They may have a group or a board member. They may run out of budget. There's a number of different reasons why that client can run dry. And if all your effort was spent purely on servicing one client instead of attracting more clients, you're going to be in a situation that you don't want to be in. Because for you to suddenly now build a portfolio and case studies and go out to market when that client gives you a 1 month deadline, saying like, this is our last month with you on your retainer, or once this project is gone, and you've been hoping for something else because you've been working through the clock, now you're sitting in a situation which you may not survive into the other month. So you need to make the networking, the marketing, the gathering of more clients, the building of content towards that region a very legitimate component of your business. Now, that doesn't need to be your entire business. It doesn't need to take up most of your time. You can run a successful YouTube podcast or Instagram or any other social media with very little more than a full dedicated day of production. You can literally stitch out the month's content, plan it out in the morning, shoot it all in the afternoon, and spend the evening editing and cutting it out. One full Saturday a month and you're done for the entire month. And then use a scheduling tool in order to pre-plan that material, or have your assistant or someone else, sit down and do that. Maybe your brother or your sister or somebody that's trying to earn something and help you grow in that beginning part of your business. The next core idea that I want you to take away from this conversation is being willing to hire people. Now, it's always a scary thing, especially when you're starting, because the immediate argument is, I don't have the money, or I don't have the capacity, or I suddenly need to skill somebody up. And that's not what I'm saying. And I don't think you need to start at these top tier levels when you're just beginning. But I think what is very useful is there's definitely areas of your business that you are not good at. There's certain things you may not love to do, and there may even be other things in your business that take exceptionally long time to do. For example, I'm a very skilled individual in my industry. I have a lot of knowledge in various forms of programming and technical problems that I'm capable of solving very, very quickly. Now, one of my processes and one of my products involves the production of various online training and educational programs. And inside of that, I have a quality serve that alongside the video program, I provide detailed transcripts, summaries, guided charts, extra questionnaires, supporting action plates to really help people integrate these things. Now, these are very simple things to do, right? I mean, I can take a script, the video is done, I can take it, pop it in ChatGPT, or pop it into Premiere Pro, get a conversion of the text, pop it into ChatGPT in order to clean up the text, and then extract out of that whatever else I need with a couple of other AI tools even, and just making sure that I analyze the data to ensure it's consistent and there's no hallucinations inside of it, and as well that it offers real value. And that's a very simple task to do. Now, that task, however, because of the time it takes, you've got to go through that, you load up the video, you've got to go through and cut it, you've got to edit everything, make sure it's good, take out the ums and the ahs. Now you've got to convert the text, now you've got to put it in, now there's that processing from you're looking at a few hours of work. If my billable time to client is, let's just say, a few $100s an hour, and I had to do that, and that took me 4 or 5 hours to do, and let's just say hypothetically my billing cost was, or my billing value to a company was $500 an hour, I'm just using example numbers here. That means if this was a 4-hour task just to get that transcripts, it would have cost my company $2,000 for my time. Versus that $2,000 could literally be somebody's salary when they're starting off in their career or beginning in their path. And that way, you're giving somebody employment, you're getting time back that can be spent on these other areas. And the reason you're probably not doing it is because you're afraid you're not going to get that business. Because again, see the earlier steps, right? You're trying to prove value instead of demonstrating and creating value. You're trying to get someone to see your value instead of highlighting your value through content that you're creating, through process and case studies that you put out on your site and everything else like that. Now let's look briefly at some other misconceptions inside of this space. One of the ones that I often hear is people think they need a lot of budget. You don't need a lot of budget. The only budget you need a lot of is the budget called time. Like everything else you can upscale. Like when I started off, I had no great equipment, none of these other things. I had passion and I worked additional hours on weekends, in the early mornings, into the evenings after the work that I had in order to start attracting clients and building up a portfolio so I could demonstrate my own quality work until I got enough funds through those processes, not only to supplement my lifestyle till eventually I was able to leave those careers, but also to start purchasing the additional higher quality equipment. And every piece of equipment you end up buying for your company becomes another financial resource, right? I bought cameras because I need them for my content creation and for other pieces like that. And now I have high-end camera equipment I can rent out to other clients and other potentials. I had powerful processing systems that I need for my 3D and everything. And now that's given me everything from motion capture suits to powerful render farms that I could do. Now, I'm not saying you should look at that scale, but the fact of the matter is, as long as you're making good choices with the money that you're turning in and you're not running out and spending every single bit now just because, oh, look what we've earned, let's get a little bit of extra food or extra party or extra celebration, you recognize that for the first 3 years of your business, you're gonna have to put in the extra hours. You're gonna have to say no to a couple of things. It's not gonna be fun. It doesn't have to be. In fact, it being hard is the evidence that you're doing something that most other people won't do, and that's what keeps them in that typical 9-to-5 trap until they get to the age of their life where it gets a little bit more hard and they get fired, not for any other reason but they've served their time. And they've given a lifetime to a company that's not really going to care for them when management changes. Doesn't mean the people in it don't care about you, but business is business. And for you to become religious or wedlocked to one of those is not always the best situation. Now, there may be companies, they're usually smaller, that allows better terms, but these aren't necessarily, if you're watching this video, that's not necessarily where you want to go. You want to maybe be building your own company, or you maybe want to be growing in your own freedom. And it's that you have to take in consideration. What is it? Right? What exactly is your objective? Is your objective a certain lifestyle? Is your objective to serve and help others? Is your objective to get just a little bit of extra money to live a certain kind of quality of life? Is it just to have more freedom of time? I say that laughingly because you're probably not going to get more freedom of time in the beginning, at least not until you can scale to a space where you can hire other people. And by that time, you're probably so addicted to what you're doing, if it's a real business you're really passionate about, that you're not going to be able to give it up. And that gives me the next kind of serious problem here. And the next serious problem here is that people, if you're working all your time inside of your business, you don't have a business, you have a job, right? Anything you can do in your business that you're ultimately going to have to upskill people into, you have to convert into systems, right? Because the only way you can sell the business or the product that you're creating or the company or the agency is if you have superior systems to other people, because this is what people are going to buy into. If the company that you have is completely dependent on you, if you're the only face name brand that makes that thing work and operate, then you don't have a very high likelihood of getting investors interested in, because if you go, the brand goes, and that's a problem, right? Can you take a vacation for a few weeks and be able to relax knowing that your company is going to run? Because that's the testimony of the kind of systems that are in place. You see, we all get very religious when we begin this. We're like, oh, I'm the only one that can do this. I do this the best. And trust me, I've been there and I still catch myself every now and again. That's not how you're going to get there. You need to be able to ultimately write yourself for the program. Some of the biggest companies, including Amazon, Tesla, and a variety of others, the owners of these companies have small percentage of ownership because at some point they realize, maybe I'm not the best CEO. Maybe I'm not the best CTO. Maybe I'm actually just the best guy on product. And I need to recognize that if I want to get this business to scale. And that is one of the fundamental things. You see, when we're still employed, we're still kind of looking all about, me proving myself, versus when we build the company, the product, that becomes an entity to and of itself. Now, this may be a slight transition from the freelance into the agency, but it's ultimately the same thing, because the freelance is only going to give you a certain level. And if you're happy with that level, that's fine, because the mindset between the freelance and the agency owner is different in that context of their focus point. Now look, there's a lot of other topics that we can cover into this, and we'll probably go into them in other episodes, such as systems that you can utilize, processes that you should have in place, contracts and other deals. But I want to just run through a couple of closing ideas of this video so it's not too long. You see, the first things that you should be building up as you're starting this business process is your social proof. Now, that can be in the form of client work. It also can be in the form of demonstrating ideas that others have proven. For example, if you don't have all the client work yet, there could be test cases and studies done in the areas of UX and UI or web development and new technology. And your ability to demonstrate that at a high quality level and create case studies out of that idea is very, very powerful. Yes, if you can bring it in with a case study of an actual product that you've built for a client and there's their testimonial, that will be superior, right? A user-generated content is always superior, because social proof is a big factor for us as human beings in order to establish trust, but so is credibility in all of its forms. So if you've demonstrated in your portfolio, as you've even done in employment, your ability and your capacity to do these things at a high level, you're going to get the trust you're going to get because you've got a track record. So that's the very first thing. If you have to work free for a few people, that's fine, as long as you can agree with those people that when the work is done, that they sit on camera in front of you, they take a photograph, they give you a detailed testimonial of the work and allow you to document the process and allow you to document any results that you've gotten as a result of that. So by all means, the return that you're going to get, if that one case study gets you one new client at a higher value product, it's paid for itself, right? If you've done 2, 3, 4 of those and it gives you the credibility to land one major contract or 2, 3 major contract, it's more than given its return on investment. Just make sure you pick these strategically, and also make sure you don't just accept any piece of work, but that you accept work that you want to keep doing, right? Your case studies, your proof of work shouldn't just be the stuff that you're capable of, even though that is great. But it should be work that you want to keep doing, because your case studies are going to attract the kind of clients that are looking for people that have solved that specific problem. So if you want to focus in Shopify stores, if you want to focus on WordPress building, if you want to focus on intro-based animations or VR experiences, your case studies should be filled with those, and they should be demonstratable in your socials or on your website. The next kind of core mindset there is that it's the results and not the work that matters. People, especially in the technical space, can get very orientated in the technical details. And don't get me wrong, the technical details are very important, because if they're not clearly thought through, a lot of technical debt can arise, expanding the project, making it more inflated, and having you run out of budget. But ultimately, the key there is to deliver value. And if you get caught up in these infinite intellectual complexities, you're probably going to fail to deliver the value at that high level, at least at scale, to a place where more people will convert as a result of it. As such, you need to very clearly, very quickly define what exactly is really the win here. What is the actual value that you're supposed to be delivering, and primarily focus on delivering that value and cutting out all of the other unnecessary specifications. This is also why the next part of this idea is the concept of your detailed contract. Now, the contract has many areas or focuses on itself in terms of legal binding, in terms of a business agreement done between two entities. But the other thing your contract needs to specify, your terms and conditions, wherever you want to place that, is the exact detailed specifications of what qualifies as work done and what does not qualify as work done. You see, otherwise you're going to find yourself in an infinite spectrum. If you do not pre-consider the potential cases of change, and you are not the one that shouts this up front, saying to the client, this is what we cover, this is what we do not cover. These are the areas that our cases are avoided. For example, one of mine is that my code, if I build an application for you, is covered unless the underlying infrastructure, that would be, for example, the language, the server, the database, the hosting company, any of those changes through someone else's fault, then it nullifies my work and something comes up if it's broken. If now as a result of them changing versions of PHP or moving onto moving from a dedicated server to a VPS with other problems, that's not considered a bug. That would be scoped as new work. Unless you've defined these things, it's very easy when you're starting to get yourself in these general conversations where you say things like, we guarantee our work. We guarantee that your messaging system or whatever it is always going to sound fine. We guarantee that this design is going to be good. And then meantime, that client is now moving to another country with new policies and new license agreements. And maybe you just license the music for one platform. If you've not specified all these fine details, you're going to put yourself through it. So this is where your experience in your career and talking to other people that are in the employment space can be very helpful, and speaking to experts and more experienced people to find out what those possible pitfalls are, so you have catered for them inside of your paperwork before you accept a client. And then the last one that I want to leave you with, at least for today's session, is you reserve the right to fire a client. You see, you're the one in charge now. It's your business, and you're going to find clients that are just a pain in the butt. And these are usually people that, they've got a budget to spend, or they really want to feel important, or they enjoy just pushing people around and they get too involved. You're the professional. The person comes to you for a service, right? If you're not a mouse clicker that they can point around in a program, that is abuse. And you have the right to stipulate this in your terms and in your contracts, as well as a clause by which you are permitted to exit. Just make sure you've also said that the deposit is non-refundable if you did that. Now, the catch and the reason you want to do this is because you don't want to work for someone or with somebody that's going to cost you your mental health. Right? You're not going to be delivering your best work for them. And ultimately, if you have a weak ego and you're not able to say to the client, listen, I'm sorry, we're not going this way. I'm the professional. We're going this way for this reason. You are doing an injustice to your client. They're coming to you, paying you a high fee in order to get a professional's input, advice, and ideas. And they have insecurity and nervousness, and that's why they think they need to do all those things. It's your job to reassure them and say, no, this is what we are going to do. This is why we're going to do it. And if you find yourself in the space where you're saying, oh, but I don't know what I should be doing, I don't know which one is right, then that is not a service you should be selling, at least not yet. And it's better to develop that in a more private situation and not with public clients, maybe in partnerships or collaborations with other teams that you know are going to deliver the same kind of effort to value in order to do it. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you in the next episode as we all rise as true technomancers in the business of today.